Hello, it's Sara from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. So I am reading a plethora, a ton of books right now. Big, meaty, juicy, engaging, fascinating tomes, but I'm not making a lot of progress. So I only completed 2 books this week. I also had a ton of work to do, so I think it ended up working out well because I finished the week really strong from a work perspective. I feel very good at everything that I was able to accomplish, and now I can rest and read to my heart's delight over this weekend. I'm not doing Dewey's 24-hour readathon, only because I find that the 24-hour readathon is just not my jam. I can't do that. I need to break things up in certain ways. And so for me, the 24 and 48 readathon is always a winner because I can kind of take breaks and switch it up a little bit. But I really wish everyone good luck for all of those who are doing the Dewey's readathon. Enjoy that. Okay, so let's get into the books that I finished this week. So the first thing I finished was Antonia Fraser's Quiet as a Nun. So I think I've mentioned that I'm doing Victober and I'm also doing Black British History Month. So I've been doing both of those. This is one of my little things that I snuck in, and I read this because Russell at Ink and Paper blog, as well as Ryan, who does Read by Ryan, they are doing a book club, and their book club is called the Spilling Tea Book Club, and they're going to be reading this. I love what they've been doing. They've been reading into the backlist. You know, that's my latest thing, women writers. And when I heard about this, it's a mystery. It's a little slim little thing. I thought, oh yeah, I love mysteries. I love backlisted mysteries. And I know Antonia Fraser is known as a historian. That's primarily her thing is nonfiction. So I gave it a go. It's an odd little book. I don't want to say too much because I'm going to be joining that book club. But I will say it's very sparse. It's very simply told with a ton of characters. So the premise is that there's a woman, and she is a TV presenter, and her name is Jemima Shore, and she's kind of a investigative reporter. And she gets contacted because a woman who was her childhood friend was murdered. Now, this is, that's already an interesting setup. But what's even more interesting is that she went to school at a convent, and it was called the Blessed Eleanor's Convent. And at this convent, she ended up leaving. She did not take orders, but her best friend did. And her best friend actually was incredibly wealthy, came from one of the richest families in England, and ended up being murdered. So the abbess calls her down and really wants her to figure out what happened and to help her solve the crime and just figure out what was going on in her mind. What happened? Was it suicide? Was it murder? And so she goes back to do that, leaves a kind of messy life that she's established for herself and goes back to the convent to investigate. Ironically, I read another convent story. This was written in 1977. I read another backlisted convent story with another Antonia. Antonia, instead of Fraser, it was Antonia White, and it was called Frost in May. And so 1 year, 2 convent stories. This is more than I expected. But what I find is that there's something so interesting in that cloistered environment, especially with young girls. I loved that aspect of this book, how there's really the young girls that are in school, and she feels herself like them. And of course they love her because she's one of them that went on to become a TV presenter, investigative reporter. And then there are the sisters who are kind of running the show, both as teachers and administration in the hospital, all of that. And so you've got, she's not sure who to believe, which stories, and there's all of these rumors flying around. It was interesting. I'm going to reserve my judgment and talk more in that session with everyone. I think Antonia Fraser, though, should probably stick with nonfiction because there were definitely some challenges in the writing style. In some cases, it really works for a convent because it's really bare and stripped back, and there isn't a lot of fluff. But it also was a little stiff. I guess it's also like a convent. So I can't say that I would recommend it, though I'm very glad that I read it. There you go. I'm not sure how if I gave enough, but not too much. We'll see. Okay, and then the second thing that I completed was an absolute gem. You've heard me talk about this before. This was Old in Art School, a memoir of starting over by Nell Irvin Painter. Now, Nell Irvin Painter is in her late 60s, early 70s when she decides to go back to school. She has always wanted to be a painter, an artist, a true artist. And she uses the phrase an artist, capital A's for both. She has already had an incredibly successful career. She has been a historian and been lauded as a historian, written books, history books, and has done very well, but didn't really reach the heights that she expected that she would. And so has turned herself to say, well, there's still time left in my life. I'm going to start over and do the thing that I really always wanted to do, which is to be an artist. And so she goes to art school, and it's so interesting. There's issues here. There's so many things packed in here. There's ageism. There's race. There's class. There is grief. There's also the Protestant work ethic and the idea of achievement at all cost, and just if there's a will, there's a way. Where does skill come into that? Where does talent come in? What can be learned and what is innate? I learned, personally enjoyed it for a couple different layers there. One, not having gone to art school, but being very, very interested in the art world, understanding what is the juice that comes out of art school? What is the core? What's the beating heart? And she talks a lot about how that's the critiques, and how crits work, and how theoretically you are supposed to be getting a critique. Everyone is supposed to be critiqued by the teacher or visiting faculty, as well as other students, and you're supposed to grow and learn with each critique. But what she finds is there's a hierarchy, and it's not always obvious. So there are times when she thinks that people are getting, that are producing the same material over and over and over again and getting praised for it, or getting all this extra attention, and she thinks it's because it's being seen as good. But she comes to learn that in one case, it's because the person has talent but are refusing to get out of this rut that they're into something that could elevate them or take their art further. And so there's all of these, it just felt so interesting to go along with her as she's having this experience, which is so unique and something that I will never do. And I just loved it. I also really enjoyed hearing all of her inspirations, all of her artists that she references. There were so many times when I would pause and I would go and I would look it up and be blown away by some of the art that I had never even seen and I don't know anything about. So really loved that aspect of it. This would be a fantastic book for a nonfiction November. So if you're looking for something, this would be a really great thing, especially if you like older narration, if you like dealing with humility and hard work and someone who has an interesting point of view. This is not your normal narrative. And I respected her for it. I thought it was fantastic. I actually gave it a 5. I was really blown away. And I felt like I was inspired, just like so motivated and inspired. Of course, I finished it at like 5:30 in the morning and couldn't turn on any lights to like start doing anything because I in our small apartment I didn't want to wake my husband. So my enthusiasm subdued once daylight hit and coffee was imbibed. But nonetheless, I think it was a fantastic book. Okay, so let's talk about what I'm currently reading. Making progress in Proust. This is In Search of Lost Time, Volume 2, In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. Very interesting. We're taking a different we've leapt forward in time with our main narrator, and he's a young man, kind of a teenager, and he's starting to come into his own with his own ideas and his own thoughts and his own desires. And so interesting as we see him evolve. Then I'm 75% of the way through. This is Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I'm reading both of these with Leo of A Little Book Life. And the key for me on this one, because it is a lot, a lot in a very different way than Proust. What Dickens does is he just has a lot of details and a lot of characters. So there's and plot. So it's, you're in a maze of all these people coming in and out and certain things happening. And so you have to pay attention that way. With Proust, it's more experiential. It's like, his sentences are so long that it becomes very languid, and it's very easy to kind of let your mind just kind of wander off. So they're both challenging in different ways. The key that I have found is during the day if I'm taking a walk or if I'm doing busy work, I'll listen to the audiobook. I'll come back in, I'll read a little bit. So I kind of mixing audio and physical copy. And then after I get to a section, after we check in, I watch the BBC version, and it's amazing. I actually think it might be my favorite adaptation ever, because it's bringing so many more popping so many more things into my mind than the book did, subtly and through expression and through just how they're lining it up, and the way the cinematography is amazing, so good. So that is Bleak House. Then just had another check-in today with Elizabeth of Bookish North, and we're doing Virginia Woolf's nonfiction. This is her writer's diary. And we just read 1928. So we're up to 1921. We're about halfway through. We're going to continue doing this through Nonfiction November. So this will be one of the ones that you see kind of in my Nonfiction November area. And we're going to try to amp the pace up a little bit. We've been going really slow with it just because you just want to take your time with her, because she's so thoughtful and she brings so many interesting ideas to the forefront in such small little chunks. And so I just like thinking about what she's presenting here in a different way than Proust. But she talks so much about Proust, and it's so exciting. I just finished The Confessions of Frannie Langton. This is by Sara Collins. This book is so fantastic. This is one that I read for British Black History Month. And Jacqueline from 6 Minutes for Me had told me that the audiobook was sublime. So in between Dickens, I grabbed from my library a copy of it. And she is not wrong. It was fantastic. This is a story of a young woman, Frannie Langton, who we meet her in Jamaica, and she is a house slave to a master, Mr. Langdon, and his wife. And there's another woman who is a slave with her in the kitchens and in the house. There ends up being a horrible fire that happens on the plantation, and he loses everything. But he ends up leaving Jamaica and taking her with him and going to London. he has this fascination with race. He is convinced that he can prove that there is a difference between blacks and whites. And he becomes obsessed with skulls and the skulls of black people and the skulls of white people, and also anatomy. And so she has learned how to read because his wife taught her. And it was one of the more interesting portions of the book at the very early beginning was where the other house slave tells her, you need to be careful because there's nothing more dangerous than a mistress of the house who's bored and who's putting her attention in you. And that's really what happened. So the mistress started teaching her how to read surreptitiously on the side, and she ended up getting caught. And by getting caught, she became part of an experiment to see that can Black people be taught. So it's all super disgusting. A lot of this eugenics, a lot of thinking about race. A lot of really challenging concepts that she's kind of right there in the middle of with these horrible people. And she has no control because she is enslaved. The irony is when she comes to London, slavery has been outlawed in London. And yet she is gifted to one of his friends. And she ends up as a maid in their home. And she doesn't really realize that she's free because she is and isn't. And she develops a relationship with the different people in the house, and specifically with the mistress of the house. We meet her in very similar ways, in case you've ever read Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is very similar in that when we open, she is been taken by the police and she is in custody and being held for the murder of both the master of the home and the wife. So it's a mystery, and it's told in flashbacks as she's going back and she's kind of writing all her story down. I'm here to tell you this was exceptional. Number one, it showed a fantastic aspect of what the slave trade was like, specifically sugar, the sugar plantations from Jamaica, how it influenced the London aristocracy, how they were dealing with the idea of slavery and the colonies and all of that. And then there's just so many other things in the plot that happen. It is packed, jam-packed. And it's the reveal, and the reveal, they just keep coming. Very smartly crafted. The writing is exceptional, very beautiful, very evocative. And the characters I thought were outstanding. So this was a home run. I love historical fiction. It's one of the things I really, really like. But I'm so glad that I picked this one up for Black British History Month. So thank you, Jacqueline, for the recommendation. I was going to read it anyway, but the audio was a very, very well done. Okay, so then I'm also, I do this frequently. I like to, with Victober, I like to do something that's Victober adjacent. So what I'm doing, this came up in my library hold, which is perfect timing. And this is the fourth of the Cat Holloway series. And this is Murder in the East End. And this is by Jennifer Ashley. I think I've talked about this series before. I really like this series. So it's set in the Victorian era. And our main narrator is a cook. So she actually, and the writer puts a ton of detail in what happens in the kitchen and the recipes and how much time it takes and the intricacies of timing and what it's like to be in that center of the house, in that kitchen with a scullery maid who's helping you, and you're trying to work for a mistress who's real cheap, really cheap. But the husband respects your food because your food is so exquisite. And so so that already is interesting, but then she notices things, and she's very smart and has developed a friendship with someone who has turned out to be someone who works with the police on occasion as an investigator. And because she has access to certain places, he and she will pair up to solve certain crimes. Absolutely delightful, super wonderful, smart, and interesting. So I'm going to try to knock that one out in the next couple of days, and then I have 2 days off next week. So I'm really looking forward to finishing a few things. I have yet to start any Trollope. So not only do I need to finish Bleak House, which I don't think that's going to be a problem, I need to start The Warden. It's thin, super small. I think it's perfect timing. And then I want to get to Cranford. I have not read Cranford yet, and I feel like if I don't do Victober with a Gaskell and a Trollope, then I might be doing it wrong. But that also means that I may not get to Shirley. We'll see. We'll see how ambitious I get. But I do have a lot of things that I'm looking forward to reading and prepping for Nonfiction November. I'm going to do like I did last year, Nonfiction November and novellas in November. So for me, that pair worked exquisitely. So I'm looking forward to doing that again this year. That's it. Have you read any of these? What are your thoughts? And I guess that's about it for now. And we are still in the midst of a pandemic. So as I sign off, I want to remind you to please maintain safe social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, and don't touch your face. That's it for me, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.